January 1945. Occupied Germany. Winter. The snow fell soft and silent over the ruins of what was once a proud German industrial town. The air tasted of ash and frozen mud. In the skeletal remains of a bombed-out train station, American soldiers of the 9th Infantry Division stood guard over a new shipment of prisoners. Not the usual Wehrmacht soldiers with their hollow eyes and frost-bitten hands, but something different. Among them walked women, not nurses, not auxiliaries captured far behind the lines, but uniformed women, wearing the Feldgrau wool of the German military, their faces wind-burned and defiant, their hands still calloused from whatever work the dying Reich had demanded of them. One woman stood apart from the others. She was perhaps 23, maybe younger. War aged people in ways calendars could not measure. Her name, according to the hastily scrawled POW intake form, was Marguerite Hoffmann, serial number 984657, rank Luftwaffenhelferin, an anti-aircraft auxiliary, captured near Aachen during the Allied push through the Siegfried Line. She carried nothing but a small canvas bag, army issue, stained with oil and dirt. When the processing sergeant reached for it, she pulled it close to her chest with a sudden ferocity that made the young American step back. Her eyes, pale, gray as winter sky, locked onto his. "Bitte," she whispered, "please, don't open my bag." The sergeant hesitated. In that frozen moment, surrounded by the wreckage of the Third Reich, with the mechanical growl of Sherman tanks idling nearby, and the distant percussion of artillery still pounding the Eastern Front, a simple cloth bag became a mystery. What could a captured German woman be hiding? Documents? Poison? A weapon? The war had taught soldiers to trust nothing, to expect treachery wrapped in the most innocent forms. But there was something in her voice, not desperation, not threat, but a quiet human plea that transcended uniform and nation. This moment, small and unremarkable in the vast machinery of World War II, would become something else entirely. Because what lay inside that bag was not what anyone expected, not intelligence, not contraband, but something that would, in its own quiet way, speak to the strange paradox of total war, how even in the machinery of ideology and destruction, the human heart remains stubbornly, impossibly human. To understand what Marguerite Hoffmann carried, we must first understand what she was and what the Reich had made her become. In 1943, as Germany's manpower bled away on the steppes of Russia and the deserts of North Africa, the Nazi state faced a crisis it had ideologically refused to acknowledge. The Führer's vision of German womanhood, keeper of hearth, bearer of children, nurturer of the master race, collided with the brutal arithmetic of total war. Men were dying faster than they could be replaced. Factories stood silent. Anti-aircraft batteries defending the homeland lacked crews as Allied bombers turned German cities into firestorms night after night. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, faced a choice between ideology and survival. The Luftwaffenhelferinnen, literally Luftwaffe helpers, were created as a compromise, not soldiers officially, not combatants under the Geneva Convention technically, but women nonetheless, trained to operate the very instruments of war. Searchlights, rangefinders, communications equipment, and even the loading mechanisms of the 88mm flak guns that brought down Allied bombers. By 1944, over 300,000 German women served in these auxiliary roles. They wore uniforms, they lived in barracks, they stood at their posts while bombs fell around them. They died, over 4,000 of them, in the defense of a regime that had, until desperation demanded otherwise, considered them too biologically precious to risk. Marguerite Hoffmann was one of them, recruited at 19 from a textile factory in Essen, trained for 6 weeks at a Luftwaffe school near Hamburg, then assigned to Flak Battery 47 on the western approaches to the Ruhr Valley. For 18 months, she had tracked Allied bombers through a mechanical predictor site, calculating altitude and trajectory while the guns roared and the night sky burned with tracer fire and exploding aircraft. She had seen friends obliterated when a direct hit collapsed their bunker. She had worked through winter nights so cold that the metal of the equipment froze to her bare fingers. She had eaten ersatz bread made from sawdust and potato peels. She had believed, because you had to believe in something to endure such conditions, that she was defending her homeland, her family, the civilization the party promised would last 1,000 years. And then the Americans came. The expectation among German soldiers, male and female alike, was clear. They had been told repeatedly by propaganda, by officers, by the whispered rumors that filled the barracks, the Americans were soft, degenerate, a mongrel nation of jazz music and Jewish influence, incapable of the discipline and sacrifice that defined German strength. When the inevitable defeat came, when the Allies crossed into the Reich itself, German soldiers expected brutality, revenge. The Soviets, they knew, would show no mercy, and the reports from the Eastern Front confirmed this in the most horrific terms. But the Americans and British? The propaganda was contradictory. Sometimes they were portrayed as weaklings who would crumble before German resolve, other times as war criminals who would rape and pillage. The truth, as German POWs discovered, was far stranger than either narrative. When Marguerite Hoffmann was captured on January 11, 1945, during the American counteroffensive following the Battle of the Bulge, she expected processing, interrogation, perhaps imprisonment in harsh conditions. Food would be scarce. She knew the Reich itself was starving, and why would the victors feed their prisoners better than their own people? She expected cold, discomfort, and the contempt that captors show to the defeated. She had sewn extra pockets into her uniform to hide small items, a photograph of her mother, a stub of pencil, a scrap of paper with an address. The canvas bag she carried was army issue, given to every Luftwaffe Helferin to carry gas mask and basic supplies. Inside, she had hidden something precious, something forbidden, something that, if discovered during her service, would have earned her punishment or worse. She had hidden chocolate. Not German chocolate. Such things had ceased to exist by 1943, replaced with bitter substitutes made from acorns and artificial flavorings. Not military rations, but real chocolate, American chocolate. 3 bars of Hershey's tropical chocolate, the kind issued to U.S. soldiers, designed to withstand heat and combat conditions. Each bar wrapped in brown paper, each one weighing 4 ounces, each one containing more sugar and cocoa than most German civilians had seen in 2 years. She had acquired them in November, during a brief period when her battery had been stationed near a contested village. In the chaos of shifting front lines, she had found them in an abandoned foxhole, whether left by retreating Americans or dropped by a reconnaissance patrol, she never knew. She should have turned them in. She should have shared them with her unit. Instead, she had hidden them, hoarded them, saved them for a moment when the sweetness might make the war bearable for just a few minutes. She had rationed them in secret, allowing herself a single square every few weeks, letting it melt slowly on her tongue while she closed her eyes and imagined a world where such abundance was normal. When capture came, she could not bear to leave them behind. Even facing imprisonment, even carrying evidence that she had taken enemy supplies, she had tucked them into her bag beneath a spare pair of wool socks. They represented something beyond their physical substance. They were a connection to normalcy, to pleasure, to a life not governed by deprivation. They were proof that somewhere in the world, people still lived with enough plenty that they could send chocolate to soldiers as a matter of routine. And now an American sergeant wanted to search her bag. The processing camp near Aachen was not a permanent facility. It was a temporary collection point, a former